On a distant planet called Kepler 22 Bits, there was an outlaw gang led by a man named Jisoo. Jisoo and his men were feared by many people who lived on the frontier of this new world. They often attacked small settlements and farms to steal valuable resources and supplies. Jisoo's gang was always looking for their next big score. One day, they heard a rumor about a woman who lived alone on a homestead in a remote area. This woman's name was Aiden, and people said she had access to special technology that came from the aliens who used to live on Kepler 22 Bits. This technology was worth a lot of money to the right buyers. The more Jisoo heard about Aiden and her supposed alien tech, the more he wanted to get his hands on it. He figured it would be easy to raid her property and take her captive since she was all by herself. Jisoo gathered his men and told them the plan. "Listen up, boys," Jisoo said with a wicked grin. "There's a homestead a few clicks east of here owned by some lady named Aiden. Word is she's sitting on a gold mine of alien gadgets. We're gonna pay her a little visit, shake her down, and take what's ours." The other outlaws chuckled and nodded in agreement. They were all heavily armed with laser rifles and itching for some action. Jisoo divided them into two groups, one to secure the perimeter of the property and the other to infiltrate the main house and capture Aiden. As the gang approached the homestead, Jisoo noticed the land around it looked strangely undisturbed, as if Aiden didn't venture outside much. "Looks like this is gonna be even easier than I thought," he said smugly. But when Jisoo and his men entered the grounds, sudden blasts of plasma fire erupted from hidden turrets, catching them off guard. Two outlaws went down immediately. Their weapons melted into slag. The rest scattered for cover behind the rocks and metal debris that littered the property. "What the hell?" Jisoo snarled. "I thought this lady was supposed to be alone." He peeked out from his hiding spot and saw a shadowy figure in the window of the house, armed with what looked like an advanced plasma rifle. The ground battle quickly turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the outlaws trying to flank and flush out the lone defender. But Aiden seemed to anticipate their every move, countering with precise shots and well-timed explosives that kept the gang at bay. After losing a third of his men, Jisoo called for a full frontal assault to overwhelm Aiden with sheer numbers. The remaining outlaws charged the house, blasting through the walls and windows. In the chaos, Jisoo managed to shoot the rifle out of Aiden's hands, then sent his second-in-command to subdue her. The burly outlaw emerged from the house a few minutes later, dragging a struggling Aiden by her hair. She had put up a hell of a fight, but was eventually overwhelmed. "Looks like we got what we came for, boss," he said as he threw her at Jisoo's feet. "Gotta admit, this one's a real firecracker." Jisoo glared down at Aiden, nursing a wound on his arm where one of her shots had grazed him. "More like a thorn in my side," he growled. "Tie her up in the speeder and grab anything that looks like alien tech. We're getting off this rock." As the battered and grumbling outlaws started hauling Aiden away, a strange sound suddenly filled the air, like the revving of an engine mixed with the whinny of a horse. Jisoo turned to see a lone figure appear on the horizon, silhouetted by the setting sun. It seemed to be riding some kind of mechanical steed, galloping at full speed straight toward them. Jisoo squinted, trying to make out details of the approaching interloper. Then his eyes widened as he realized who it was. The duster coat, the wide-brimmed hat, the unmistakable glint of metal where an arm should be. "It can't be," he whispered in disbelief. There was no mistaking it. The figure riding in was none other than Da-Yun, the infamous Deadeye Drifter, the most feared and respected gunslinger on the frontier. And he was headed straight for them like a bat out of hell. Jisoo felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as he braced himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. Something told him this kidnapping wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. As the mysterious rider approached the homestead, the outlaws paused in confusion, unsure of how to react. Jisoo narrowed his eyes, trying to make out details of the man's appearance. The rider wore a long, dusty coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. Most striking of all was his left arm, which appeared to be made entirely of gleaming metal. "Da-hyun," Jisoo muttered under his breath. The Deadeye Drifter. Da-hyun was a legendary figure on the frontier of Kepler 22 bits, known far and wide for his incredible speed and accuracy with a gun. It was said that he never missed a shot, and that he showed no mercy to those who preyed on the innocent. As Da-hyun drew closer, Jisoo could see that he was riding some kind of robotic horse, its metal flanks reflecting the harsh sunlight. The gunslinger came to a stop a short distance from the outlaws, his coat flapping in the breeze. "Jisoo," Da-hyun called out, his voice low and steady. "I'd heard you were in the area, causing trouble as usual. Didn't think you'd stoop to kidnapping, though." Jisoo's men shifted uneasily, their weapons trained on the lone rider. Jisoo himself stepped forward, trying to project an air of confidence. "This is none of your business, Deadeye," he sneered. "We're just taking what's rightfully ours. The lady here has something we want." Da-hyun's gaze flickered to Aiden, who was being held roughly by two of the outlaws. She met his eyes defiantly, her chin lifted high. "Doesn't look to me like she's given you permission to take anything," Da-hyun said calmly. "I'm going to have to ask you to let her go and be on your way." Jisoo let out a harsh laugh. "And if we don't, what are you going to do? Take on all of us by yourself?" In response, Da-hyun slowly reached down and unholstered one of the strange-looking pistols at his side. It was larger than a normal gun, with a glowing blue chamber that hummed with energy. "I'll give you one chance," Da-hyun said quietly. "Release the lady and leave this place. No one has to get hurt." Jisoo's face twisted into a snarl. He knew Da-hyun's reputation, but he couldn't back down in front of his men. "To hell with that," he spat. "Boys, light him up." At Jisoo's command, the outlaws opened fire on Da-hyun with their laser rifles. But the gunslinger was already in motion, his robotic steed leaping to the side with incredible speed. Da-hyun raised his pistol and fired off 3 quick shots, the plasma bolts streaking through the air with unerring accuracy. 3 of Jisoo's men dropped to the ground, their weapons falling from their lifeless hands. The others faltered, shocked by the display of skill. Da-hyun used their moment of hesitation to sprint towards Aiden, moving faster than any normal human could. He reached her in seconds, his metal arm lashing out to knock aside her captors. Aiden stumbled free, her eyes wide with surprise. "Get to cover," Da-hyun told her urgently. "Things are about to get messy." Aiden nodded and ran towards the house as Da-hyun turned to face the remaining outlaws. Jisoo was screaming orders, his face purple with rage. "Kill him," he shrieked. "Kill him now." The outlaws attacked again, but they were no match for Da-hyun's lightning-fast reflexes and deadly aim. He wove through their laser fire like a dancer, his coat whirling around him as he fired shot after shot. Outlaws fell left and right, until only Jisoo was left standing. The outlaw leader stared at Da-hyun with a mixture of fear and hatred, his hand shaking on his gun. "You can't stop me," he snarled. "I'll have what's mine, one way or another." Da-hyun shook his head, his expression almost sad. "Walk away, Jisoo," he said softly, "while you still can." But Jisoo's pride wouldn't let him back down. With a wordless cry of rage, he raised his weapon and fired at Da-hyun. The gunslinger simply leaned to the side, the laser bolt passing harmlessly by his head. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent a plasma shot straight through Jisoo's chest. The outlaw leader crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide with shock. He tried to say something, but only a trickle of blood escaped his lips. Da-hyun holstered his pistol and turned towards the house, where Aiden was watching from the window. The battle was over, but somehow he knew that this was only the beginning of something much larger. He had a feeling that his path was about to become inextricably tied to the mysterious woman with the alien technology, and that together, They would face challenges and dangers beyond anything the frontier had ever seen before. After the intense shootout with Jisu's gang, an uneasy calm settled over Aiden's homestead. Da-hyun approached the house cautiously, his robotic horse clopping softly behind him. He paused at the door, unsure of what kind of reception he would receive from the woman inside. Aiden emerged slowly, a guarded expression on her face. She had seen Da-hyun's incredible fighting skills firsthand, but she wasn't sure if he posed a threat to her as well. "I suppose I should thank you," she said wearily, "for dealing with those outlaws." Da-hyun tipped his hat slightly. "No need for thanks, ma'am. I was just doing what needed to be done." He glanced around at the scattered bodies of Jisu's men. "Though I have to say, you seem to be holding your own pretty well before I arrived. That's some impressive weaponry you've got." Aiden's eyes narrowed. "Let's just say I like to be prepared. One can never be too careful out here on the frontier." Da-hyun nodded, sensing there was more to Aiden's story than she was letting on. "Well, I shouldn't take up any more of your time. I'll be on my way." He turned to leave, but Aiden called out after him. "Wait, you're the Deadeye Drifter, aren't you? I've heard stories about you. They say you're the fastest gun on Kepler 22 bits." Da-hyun paused, then turned back to face her. "Some people say a lot of things. Not all of them are true. But you are him, right?" Da-hyun. He hesitated, then nodded once. "That's what they call me." Hayden studied him for a long moment. "I have a proposition for you. Jisu and his gang were just the beginning. There will be others who come for me and my tech. I could use someone with your skills to help protect me." Da-hyun raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me to be your bodyguard?" "More like a partner. I have resources that could be valuable to you as well. Advanced tech that needs to be kept out of the wrong hands." She could see him considering her words carefully. "It's a big planet out there," she continued. "Lots of people who could use the help of someone like you. I can point you in their direction, give you a purpose beyond just drifting." Da-hyun was silent for a long time. He had been alone for so long, focused only on survival and the next job. The idea of having a larger mission, of using his skills to actually help people, was strangely appealing. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Why not just hire some regular muscle?" Aiden smiled slightly. "Because I think there's more to you than just being a hired gun. I think you have a code, a sense of justice, and I think together we could make a real difference on this frontier." Da-hyun looked out over the barren landscape of Kepler 22 bits, the endless red sand dunes and towering rock formations. It was a harsh and unforgiving place, but it was also a world full of possibility, a place where someone like him could perhaps find a new path. He turned back to Aiden and extended his metal hand. "All right, partner, you've got yourself a deal." Aiden grasped his hand firmly, sealing their new alliance. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that they would face many dangers and challenges ahead. But with Da-hyun by her side, she felt a sense of hope and determination that she hadn't experienced in a long time. Together, the gunslinger and the woman with the alien tech would forge a new legend on the frontier. A story of justice, redemption, and the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of adversity. And so, as the twin moons of Kepler 22 bits rose over the desolate landscape, Da-hyun and Aiden set out on the first steps of their shared journey. Two lost souls, brought together by fate, ready to take on whatever the wild frontier had in store for them. It was the beginning of a beautiful and deadly partnership, one that would be told in hushed whispers and odd tales for generations to come. The legend of the Deadeye Drifter and the woman who tamed his restless heart. Da-hyun and Aiden set out across the barren landscape of Kepler 22 bits, the twin moons casting an eerie glow across the red sand dunes. They rode in silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts about the new partnership they had forged. Suddenly, the sound of distant engines shattered the stillness of the night. Da-hyun pulled up short, his robotic horse whirring softly beneath him. He scanned the horizon with narrowed eyes, his hand resting lightly on the plasma pistol at his hip. "We've got company," he said grimly. "Looks like Jisu's men weren't the only ones interested in your tech." Aiden cursed under her breath. "I was afraid of this. There's a group of mercenaries that have been after me for months, ever since they got wind of what I possess." Dahyun glanced at her, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "And what exactly is it that you possess that's so valuable?" Aiden hesitated for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "It's a piece of alien technology that I discovered in some ancient ruins. A device that can manipulate energy in ways we've never seen before. In the wrong hands, it could be devastating." Dahyun nodded slowly. "Then we better make sure it stays in the right hands." The sound of the approaching engines grew louder, and soon they could see the glint of metal on the horizon. A dozen heavily armed hoverbikes were speeding towards them, the mercenaries riding them bristling with weapons. "We can't outrun them," Aiden said, her voice tight with tension. "We're going to have to stand and fight." Dahyun gave her a wry smile. "I thought you'd never ask." He spurred his robotic horse forward, Aiden following close behind on her own steed. They raced towards the oncoming mercenaries, the red sand flying out behind them in a billowing cloud. As they drew closer, Dahyun could see the leader of the mercenary group, a tall man with a cruel face and a jagged scar running down his cheek. He raised his plasma rifle and fired off a shot, the bolt of energy sizzling past Dahyun's ear. The gunslinger responded with a shot of his own, the blue plasma bolt striking one of the hoverbikes and sending it spiraling out of control. The mercenary riding it screamed as he was thrown clear, his body tumbling limply across the sand. Aiden and Dahyun split up, each taking on a group of the mercenaries. Aiden proved to be a formidable fighter in her own right, wielding a pair of energy blades with deadly precision. She sliced through the mercenaries' armor like it was paper, leaving a trail of sparking metal and severed limbs in her wake. Dahyun, meanwhile, was a blur of motion, his plasma pistols flashing as he took out target after target. His robotic arm allowed him to aim and fire with superhuman speed and accuracy, and soon the sand was littered with the smoking remains of hoverbikes and mercenaries. Finally, only the leader of the mercenaries was left. He faced off against Dahyun, his scared face twisted with rage and hate. "You think you can stop me today?" he snarled. "I've been chasing that alien tech for years, and I won't let some washed-up gunslinger stand in my way." Dahyun just smiled, his eyes glinting beneath the brim of his hat. "Funny," he said softly. "I was about to say the same thing to you." The mercenary leader let out a wordless scream of fury and charged at Dahyun, his plasma blade flashing in the moonlight. Dahyun stood his ground, his pistols held loosely at his sides. At the last moment, just as the mercenary was about to strike, Dahyun moved. He sidestepped the plasma blade with almost casual grace, then brought his metal fist crashing down on the mercenary's wrist. The man howled in pain as the blade fell from his nerveless fingers, clattering to the sand. Dahyun pressed the barrel of his pistol to the mercenary's forehead, his eyes cold and hard. "Walk away," he said quietly, "while you still can." The mercenary stared at him for a long moment, his face twisted with hate and fear. Then, slowly, he backed away, his hands held high in surrender. "This isn't over, Deadeye," he spat. "I'll be back, and next time, that alien tech will be mine." Dahyun watched impassively as the mercenary leader limped away into the night, then turned to face Aiden. She was standing amid the wreckage of the battle, her energy blades still glowing faintly. "You okay?" Dahyun asked, holstering his pistols. Dahyun and Aiden rode hard through the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the site of their battle with the mercenaries. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in shades of orange and red, they finally slowed their pace, allowing their mechanical steeds a chance to cool down. Aiden glanced over at Dahyun, noting the grim set of his jaw, and the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon for any sign of trouble. She knew that their encounter with the mercenaries was just the beginning, and that they would face many more challenges in the days and weeks to come. As they rode, Aiden found herself thinking about the alien technology that had brought her and Da-hyun together. She had been studying the device for months, trying to unlock its secrets, but there was still so much she didn't understand. Da-hyun seemed to sense her thoughts, and he turned to her with a questioning look. "So this alien tech of yours," he said, his voice low and even. "What exactly does it do?" Aiden hesitated for a moment, weighing her words carefully. She knew that the knowledge she held was dangerous, and that in the wrong hands, it could be used to cause unimaginable harm. But she also knew that if she and Da-hyun were going to be partners, they needed to trust each other completely. "The device is a power source," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But not like anything we've ever seen before. It's capable of generating and storing massive amounts of energy, more than all the fusion reactors on Kepler 22 bits combined." Da-hyun's eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "But that's not all," Aiden went on, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "The device also has the ability to manipulate energy on a fundamental level. It can change the very nature of matter itself, breaking it down and rebuilding it in ways that should be impossible according to our understanding of physics." Da-hyun let out a low whistle, his mechanical hand flexing unconsciously at his side. "That's some heavy stuff," he said, his voice tinged with both awe and apprehension. "No wonder those mercenaries were so hell-bent on getting their hands on it." Aiden nodded grimly. "And they're not the only ones. There are others out there who would stop at nothing to possess this technology. Governments, corporations, criminal syndicates, they all want it for their own purposes, and they don't care who they have to hurt or kill to get it." Da-hyun was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon ahead. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but filled with a quiet intensity. "We won't let that happen," he said, his words a solemn vow. "We'll keep the device safe, no matter what it takes, and we'll use it to help people, not to cause more harm and suffering." Aiden felt a sudden rush of emotion at his words, a mixture of gratitude and relief, and something else she couldn't quite name. She had been carrying the burden of the alien technology for so long, always looking over her shoulder, never knowing who to trust. But with Da-hyun by her side, she felt a newfound sense of hope and purpose. "Thank you," she said softly, reaching out to place a hand on his arm. "I couldn't do this without you, Da-hyun. I'm glad we found each other." Da-hyun looked down at her hand, then back up at her face, his eyes softening for just a moment before his usual stoic mask slipped back into place. "We've got a long road ahead of us," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "But we'll face it together, partner, no matter what happens." With that, they urged their steeds forward once more, the rising sun at their backs as they rode towards an uncertain future. The weight of the alien technology hung heavy between them, a secret that could change the course of history itself. But for now, they had each other, and the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. And so, the legend of Da-hyun and Aiden continued to grow, whispered around campfires and in the darkened corners of frontier towns. Two unlikely heroes, bound together by fate and purpose, ready to take on whatever challenges the universe saw fit to throw their way. As Da-hyun and Aiden rode on, they found themselves entering a narrow canyon, the towering red rock walls pressing in on either side. The air was still and heavy, and an eerie silence hung over the landscape, broken only by the steady clopping of their mechanical steeds. Suddenly, without warning, a shimmering force field sprang up in front of them, blocking their path forward. Da-hyun cursed under his breath, his hand instinctively reaching for his plasma pistol. "What is this?" he growled, his eyes scanning the canyon walls for any sign of trouble. Aiden frowned, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a trap," she said, her voice tight with tension. "Someone must have known we were coming this way." No sooner had the words left her mouth than a figure stepped out from behind a nearby boulder, a plasma rifle cradled in his arms. He was a tall, wiry man with a shock of silver hair and a face lined with age and experience. "Well, well, well," the man said, his voice soft but filled with an undercurrent of menace. "What have we here?" The infamous Deadeye Drifter and his new partner, the keeper of the alien tech. Da-Hyun's eyes narrowed, his finger tightening on the trigger of his pistol. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. The man smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "My name is Jae-sung, and I represent certain interested parties who would very much like to acquire your little device." Aiden tensed, her hand drifting towards the energy blade at her hip. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen," she said, her voice calm but firm. Jae-sung chuckled, shaking his head. "Oh, I think it will," he said, his tone almost conversational. "You see, I have a small army of mercenaries waiting just outside this canyon, ready to take the device by force if necessary. But I'm a reasonable man, and I'd prefer to avoid any unpleasantness. So why don't you just hand it over, and we can all go our separate ways?" Da-Hyun and Aiden exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. They both knew that they couldn't let the alien technology fall into the wrong hands, no matter the cost. "I'm afraid we can't do that," Da-Hyun said, his voice steady and unyielding. "The device stays with us." Jae-sung sighed, a look of mock regret crossing his face. "Very well," he said, raising his plasma rifle. "I suppose we'll have to do this the hard way." But before he could pull the trigger, a blinding flash of light erupted from behind him, followed by the deafening roar of an explosion. Jae-sung was thrown to the ground, his rifle clattering away across the rocky terrain. Da-Hyun and Aiden whirled around, their weapons at the ready, only to see a figure emerging from the smoke and dust. It was a woman, tall and lean, with close-cropped hair and a face that seemed chiseled from stone. "Stand down," the woman said, her voice calm but commanding. "I'm not here to fight." Da-Hyun and Aiden exchanged another glance, uncertain whether to trust this unexpected newcomer. But before they could make a decision, the woman raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Min Seo," she said, her eyes locked on Aiden. "And I'm here to help you protect the alien device." Aiden's eyes widened in surprise, her grip on her energy blade loosening slightly. "How do you know about the device?" she asked, her voice wary. Min Seo smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes that spoke of a deep and abiding pain. "Because I was the one who found it first," she said softly. "And I've been searching for someone worthy to entrust it to ever since." Da-Hyun and Aiden shared a long, meaningful look, a silent conversation passing between them in the space of a heartbeat. They both knew that they had stumbled upon something much larger than themselves, a destiny that had been set in motion long before they had ever met. "All right," Da-Hyun said finally, holstering his pistol. "We're listening. What do you propose?" Min Seo's smile widened, a glimmer of hope sparking in her eyes. "I propose an alliance," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "Together, we can keep the device safe and use it to help those in need. We can be a force for good in this troubled world." Da-Hyun and Aiden nodded, their own smiles mirroring Min Seo's. They knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, filled with dangers they could scarcely imagine. But they also knew that they had found something worth fighting for, a cause that transcended their own lives and desires. And so, as the twin moons of Kepler 22 bits rose high in the night sky, the Gunslinger, the keeper of the alien tech, and their newfound ally set out together, bound by a common purpose and a shared destiny. The legend of Da-Hyun and Aiden had taken on a new chapter, and the frontier would never be the same again. As Da-Hyun, Aiden, and their new ally Min Seo rode away from the site of their confrontation with Jae-sung, a sense of purpose and determination filled the air. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay before them. For days, they traveled across the rugged terrain of Kepler 22 bits, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Mincio spoke of her own journey to find the alien device and the sacrifices she had made along the way. Dahyun and Aiden, in turn, spoke of their own struggles and the events that had brought them together. As they traveled, they began to formulate a plan for how they would use the alien technology to help those in need. They knew that they couldn't simply give the device away, as it was too powerful and too dangerous in the wrong hands. Instead, they would have to find a way to use it selectively, targeting those who were most in need of its benefits. Their first opportunity to put their plan into action came sooner than they expected. As they rode into a small frontier settlement, they found the town in a state of crisis. A group of raiders had attacked the settlement, stealing vital supplies and leaving the inhabitants on the brink of starvation. Without hesitation, Dahyun, Aiden, and Mincio sprang into action. Using the alien device, they were able to quickly replicate the stolen supplies, providing the townspeople with the food and water they so desperately needed. The grateful settlers welcomed them as heroes, and word of their deeds began to spread across the frontier. From that day forward, the trio became known as the Guardians of the Frontier, using the alien technology to help those in need wherever they went. They faced many challenges and dangers along the way, from rival factions seeking to claim the device for themselves to the harsh realities of life on a lawless frontier world. But through it all, they remained true to their mission, bound together by their shared sense of purpose and their unwavering commitment to justice. And as the legend of their deeds continued to grow, they began to inspire others to take up the fight alongside them, forming a movement that would change the face of Kepler 22 bits forever. Years later, as Dahyun and Aiden sat by a campfire under the stars, they reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. They had faced countless trials and tribulations, but through it all, they had remained true to themselves and to each other. As the embers of the fire began to die down, Aiden turned to Dahyun with a smile, her eyes shining with the light of 1,000 stars. "Do you remember the day we first met?" she asked softly, her hand coming to rest on his arm. Dahyun nodded, his own smile mirroring hers. "How could I forget?" he replied, his voice warm with the weight of shared memories. "You were a force to be reckoned with even then, fighting off those outlaws with everything you had." Aiden laughed, the sound like music in the stillness of the night. "And you were the mysterious stranger who rode in to save the day, like something out of an old Earth legend." They sat in silence for a long moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Dahyun spoke, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "I never thought I'd find a place where I belonged, a purpose that was worth fighting for. But then I met you, and everything changed." Aiden smiled, her hand tightening on his arm. "We've come a long way since then," she said quietly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And we've still got a long way to go. But I know that as long as we're together, there's nothing we can't face." As the twin moons of Kepler 22 bits began to set behind the horizon, the two heroes sat in contented silence, their hearts full of the knowledge that they had found something truly precious in each other. And though the road ahead was sure to be long and difficult, they knew that they would face it together, bound by the unbreakable bonds of love and loyalty that had brought them this far. And so, the legend of Dahyun and Aiden passed into the annals of history, a shining beacon of hope and courage in a galaxy that had all but forgotten the meaning of those words. Their story would be told and retold for generations to come, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a light to guide the way home.